Let's make it our business. A climate podcast that's about innovators, change makers, and entrepreneurs who are taking actions, creating solutions, and inspiring many. This podcast is supported by US Department of State, created by BBC Media Action, India.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Cool It Down. My name is Sayema, and if you are one of those who are wondering what does climate entrepreneurship got to do with climate policy, then this episode is a must-hear for you as we speak to these brilliant minds and unpack this connection. We're just about to dive into the fascinating intersection of climate action and policy, where bold ideas meet meaningful change. My guest is someone who's been at the forefront of creating impact in this space. Ashish, a social entrepreneur and co-founder of the MASH Project Foundation. Ashish studied at LKY School of Public Policy, National University of Singapore, and he was also the president of the Social Investment Group at LKY School. Ashish's journey is one of turning challenges into opportunities, and I can't wait to unpack his experiences, insights, the wisdom he's gained while working to create a better, more sustainable future. Let's jump right in. Thank you so much, Ashish, for joining us today.
Thank you, Sayema. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Ashish, take us back to the moment when you knew this was your calling. Was there a specific event or realization that pushed you to focus your energy on tackling climate and social challenges?
I think I wouldn't say it was just one particular moment, maybe several such moments put together. Mm-hmm. But I think I started my journey as a young volunteer way back in my high school. I was part of the environment club in my high school. And I think like most of the young people, their first orientation to doing something good starts at places like their schools or like, any special hobby classes they are part of, right? So I think that experience was my first ever interaction with, these simple activities like planting trees to cleaning your neighborhood. Those were the, I would say, first step, but that got me really excited because I think somewhere deep inside me, I had this, immense joy of immediately seeing a tangible impact of the work that you're doing.
Right.
And I wanted to do something more. So I, over my summer break, I came across this interesting opportunity in the student newspaper where a local non-profit was looking for volunteers for one of their programs, and I went there, signed up. And that was, I think, one turning point, I would say, because I kind of went beyond my usual comfort group to now go and volunteer with this particular nonprofit,
right,
which was like almost a 40-45 minutes journey. And I would, still being a 15-year-old, would go there, and even after summer break, continue to do that, right? So one, I would say, something I think I really highly advise many young people to also do is to find more than the issue, it's finding the people, that you like to work with. So the community is really important. So I think I found a lot of like-minded people who were really passionate about doing good. And I think that was, I think, very, very, I would say, a turning point where I felt like, oh, wow, you can work with people you enjoy to work with and you do something meaningful. So I think why not continue to pursue that? And a few years down the line, I came across an opportunity with British Council, which selected few young people from different countries to bring them in London for a week-long program called the Global Change Makers. And after that program, then, as a young person, you can build your own programs. Okay. So I started a campus cleaning drive in my college. I had just graduated from my school, went to college. So I wanted to do something to clean my, campus and tell people about waste segregation, and create something meaningful from that segregated waste. So involved with local communities. And thereon, so I think that journey sort of continued to be making more sustainable models for waste management and going more deeper passion into, using social enterprise and working with multi-stakeholders to create a much wider impact, right?
So since school, you've been driven, and you've been doing some incredible stuff. Something like turning waste into a global case study with your decentralized waste management model. I'd like to hear about that. How did this idea come about and what did day one of that journey look like for you?
Yeah, so continuing, so what happened was when I was doing this in college, I, got some of the local media, local press talked about that issue. And then I was approached by someone who was actually working to, advocate for waste segregation, plastic waste, and creating more, I would say, a circular model around waste, because waste, the way
Okay.
we look at, and to till date at a large metros, big cities across the country, we have these huge landfills. So whatever is coming
Right.
out from our homes is getting dumped into these big landfills, right?
Right.
So the idea, that was there, that how about you segregate the waste and do not like burn or put them in rivers. So I designed a CSR program for this association, and they kind of really liked the idea. And we ran that for about an year in the central Delhi, right at the heart of the center of Delhi in Connaught Place, and engaged with the municipal corporation. We worked with the local non-profit, engaged with the waste pickers, the trader, the marketing association of Connaught Place. So it was kind of like engaging different stakeholder for a common cause, common issue, which would affect all of us, right?
Right.
So in the morning, I would do my classes in college. In the evening, I would go run this program. But one thing I realized, Saima, that during while I was doing this program, it was a CSR funded, a CSR driven program. And like most of these grant driven programs, sometimes they have a shelf life, in terms
Yeah.
of whereas funded, supported, right?
Yeah.
So, and I started thinking, and I was studying my business management. So I put this, entrepreneurial hat and started thinking, how about we turn this waste into some resource so we can create a sustainable model for the waste pickers, especially because we've worked with them, we've trained them. It has started to show some impact in their lives also, the way they look at waste, not just as seen as a very like a bottom of the pyramid job, to making something more like a dignified job, right?
Right. Right.
So I've been researching and came across some very interesting models that have been done in various countries, and then looking at our local context. And that's when we designed this decentralized model of waste management.
Right.
So what is a centralized model is basically collecting the waste, taking to a landfill, and then trying to create some, resource out of it, right? You
That's
are
right.
trying to make energy, you're trying to recycle, but that's very, very complex. Plus,
Yeah.
it's far more time taking. You also, deploy, like hundreds and thousands of trucks who are then again creating all the more pollution, to transport the waste. So instead of like building a big facility at the landfill, the idea was to, create a smaller facility in a given piece of complex or a colony which can treat a waste. So imagine it like
Okay.
a one residential, let's say an apartment, have a dedicated waste facility where all the waste from different households will come, get segregated, or the best case scenario is that they get segregated at the household itself. Then they are brought, treated, and whatever the output you get is put back into that community.
Right.
It's
So we
a
don't have like landfills problem and so much of waste
absolutely,
at one place that we have to dedicate a
absolutely,
whole lot of resources to clear that up. And
yeah.
this localized effort, I think, also kind of encouraged a lot of community participation, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we saw actually that, so in New Moti Bagh, which is in Chanakyapuri in Delhi, we actually built that entire process, entire project. We piloted this, and it's been a huge success ever since. It's been more than 10 years in running now. And there's almost all different kinds of waste are like segregated, treated, some kind of complex waste which we don't have enough, let's say, technology there, is like stored properly and then sent to those recyclers. For example, electronic waste, or your other kind of inert waste which you cannot process there. But
Right.
we do plastic to oil, we do from your kitchen and the wet or biodegradable waste, we make manure. Then we've been doing a lot of your even the other kind of waste which can be upcycled, right? Like paper waste, cardboard. There's a lot of those kind of waste which can also be reprocessed in a way.
Right, right. Ashish, I want you to look back to the learnings that you would want to share with a lot of young people who will be listening to you right now. What's that one small step they can take today to begin their own journey toward climate action or social entrepreneurship? Also, talk about the challenges that they should be ready to face.
Great. I think one of the things which I, again, share with a lot of young people is that, sometimes we have these big fancy ideas that, we have to solve this huge problem like climate out there. And what can I do as a young person? I think one of the most I would say a motivating thing is that you're able to visualize, we are able to feel that your work is creating impact. Like I said,
Yeah.
when I was at school, just the fact that you're able to clean a complex and see a, cleaner place is making you push towards doing something good, right?
Right.
So pick up an issue which is something that affects you more than anything else, right? It affects you and you can see a tangible impact of your work towards that issue, right?
Right.
The second thing is that, build a community of like-minded people. Doing anything good, of course, need more than just you. It needs a team. It needs a group of people.
Yeah.
You can join something existing or you can start something existing, right? If most of our listeners are in school or colleges, I think that's a great place because you find a community where you anyway spending a lot of time.
That's right.
And a lot of these schools and colleges these days have various such initiatives which allows people to pick up programs and do themselves, right? Or you can even choose to volunteer, for a non-profit whom I'm already doing, because that gives you a very good hands-on experience to work with an issue in a much more organized manner and you have a community to support you, right?
Right.
But if you figure out what you want to do, and as for the ones who are looking to start their own ventures, be a social entrepreneur, I think my only advice would be is to don't think about starting, is to just go out there and start working on the problem that you're working. It could be within climate. There are so many issues, from air pollution to drought to waste to there are just so many problems out there. And
Right.
a good thing is there is a lot of push from the government, from the policymakers, and overall ecosystem around climate is shaping really well. So there are a lot of opportunities also for entrepreneurs these days who are starting on an idea within to solve climate change, to get supported by incubation programs. There are mentorship programs. There are a lot of these coaching programs which are helping young people also build careers, right, within the climate space, right? So yeah, I think three piece of bullet point advice is to have a big dream, but you got to start small and you have to act now. Don't wait. Climate really needs a lot of action, lot of collective action, and we have to act now.
Right, so just get going. Ashish, you studied at LKY School and you were also the president of the Social Investment Group. How do you see policy and grassroots action coming together to create real change?
Yes, absolutely. So, Saima, studying policy also gave a lot of context in terms of how policymakers are thinking. How can you build solutions which can be scaled? And all the more important is to, really understand issues from a lens of both empathy to people who are affected the most. At the same time, using data, using certain tools which allows you to design programs for them, right? So I think that has been a really good experience. It's at the same time it's been a humbling experience, because a lot of time when you're design and working on programs,
Right.
you may not think from all the stakeholders lens. So I think that has been a great experience. But like I said, what all the more I'm spending time while talking to people at some of these institutes, being part of several national as well as international program, is that there is a strong intent to do good, and it's a good time for us to sort of tap into various opportunities that are available, right? So there are, and thanks to social media, digital media, and the penetration of internet, and now reaching out to also a lot of grassroots communities become far more accessible, right? I can think of countless number of examples on organizations who are doing some very innovative work, and there is a room for also a lot more where we can use data, we can use technology, and really see it from the lens of empathy and build our solutions putting all of these things together.
Right. Ashish, the last question is a personal question, but it is very important. You've already achieved so much at a relatively young age. What motivates you to keep going, and how do you inspire others around you to take action? What's the secret mantra?
I think there's no secret mantra. I really, really love and enjoy working with like-minded people, building communities, and the work that creates impact. So while we are working on some big issues, but then you can tangibly see the impact of the work, and it has to be meaningful. At the end of the day, you may make a lot of money, you may go to different places, you get a lot of recognition. I think all of that, and put one aside, but once you see your work creating a meaningful impact, I think that's a great personal motivation for me.
Right.
And my advice to other people who might be listening to this podcast today is to that find purpose behind your work. Whatever you do, it should help you inspire every day. There will be days when you feel a bit low, or you would feel you will question a lot about yourself, especially as entrepreneurs. Sometimes you're going through a challenging phase, and then those kind of self-doubt is difficult to go through, right? But a certain level of belief that yes, if you've come so far, you can go a lot more, helps you to continue walking on that journey.
Right.
And all the more important is, I think role models also play a big role. When you have peers, friends, and people, some of these names that we hear in stories, from Greta Thunberg to Malala to Kailash Satyarthi, there are such great examples of people who we look up to.
Yes.
But you start working closely with some of them, and then you realize, oh wow, if they could do it, you could do it too. So I think that kind of pushes you to do better. Yes, that we are just like them, and if they can make such a big difference, why cannot I do that?
This conversation has been nothing short of inspiring, Ashish. Thank you for sharing your incredible journey, insights, and practical advice with us. If there's one thing this episode has taught me, it's that every step, no matter how small, can spark meaningful change. To everyone listening in, I hope today's episode leaves you feeling motivated to take your own steps toward a better, more sustainable world. And thank you so much, Ashish, for joining us today.
Thank you, Sayema.
Keep listening in, as this conversation is bound to get intense with our next guest. Our next guest is Kaushik Deb, the Executive Director at EPIC. Kaushik has been a driving force in shaping energy policies and supporting innovative solutions. Together, we'll explore how individual startups and governments can work towards a more sustainable energy future. Let's get started. Welcome to the podcast, Kaushik.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to be here.
Kaushik, India is seeing a lot of exciting clean energy startups. If a young entrepreneur came to you for advice on where to focus their efforts to make the biggest difference, what would you say?
So instead of picking a sector or an activity or saying that this is where you should put your $500,000 in, what I'd kind of point out is take a step back and look at what India is doing in this space and why.
Interesting.
India's industrialization strategy is pretty unique. And even before the IRA or what the European Union is trying to do, we had decided to focus on an industrial strategy that brought to fore the kind of activities that are not very energy intensive and do not require that amount of fossil fuels, but still would generate employment and prosperity of a fairly high order.
Right.
These are activities in hospitality, in the medicine industry, information technology services, manufacturing, microchips, and cell phones.
Right.
So, industrial strategy that is not so energy or resource intensive allows for growth in all of these sectors while generating employment and prosperity. Now, if that's something that India does adopt as an industrial policy, and that's the developmental strategy that the government follows,
Right.
then the plethora of activities and sectors that are available for investment and action are immense. And that's where I would focus all my energies in. That's how we've increased renewable energy capacity in this country. That's why the deployment of electric vehicles across the board
Right.
in the 2 and 3 wheeler segment has become so dominant. That's what I would be thinking about.
And I think that's an awesome perspective, a very different way to look at the opportunities. Kaushik, you've worked on major policies. But what's one simple thing you think every person can do today to help create a more sustainable energy future? Every individual wants to make a difference.
This is a age old question. There are 1,000 choices that we make every day that could benefit when seen through the lens of sustainability.
Right.
But these are kind of seemingly hard to change and ingrain and then aggregate across all of us in society to make that very, very big difference. I mean, in principle, it sounds simple, but it's really, really hard, and even harder at the aggregate social level. So what I kind of suggest is that we just focus on one thing that we can do
Right.
every 4 or 5 years. And I don't know if you can taking the hint. Every time that we choose our leaders, we
Right.
should probably pick folk that reflect our sensibilities toward the environment, because that could be transformative.
Right.
Democracies, voting, how that impacts outcomes for nations, for firms, for societies. That's really what we need to be doing. And even if we do it just once in 4 or 5 years, we would have set the world up for success.
That's really really nice, and something that we wouldn't really think about when it comes to sustainability. But I think any action towards the policy level or advocacy level actually begins at evaluating where we are standing. So we are standing as an electorate, a voter. We got to think about that. Sometimes big changes come from unexpected places. Uh, Kaushik, can you share a story of a person or a small company that changed the energy sector in a way no one saw coming?
Let me do even one better, right? So instead of a sector or an activity, I don't know whether you remember when Uber came into the market or when Airbnb came into the market, and suddenly we had this really transformative,
Yeah.
disruptive business model where this asset absent or asset light companies were literally taking over delivery of these really, really important and services central to our own lives and living.
That's right.
Transportation services, housing, food, everything. What that did was that democratized the asset ownership so much more remarkably.
Yeah.
Now, you didn't really need scale of, say a 10 cars or 5 buses to be able to have a viable transport business. An individual could be viable on by themselves. But the flip side of this is that it's created a very interesting opportunity for the energy transition. We now have a captive market for a number of these aggregated services where the transition to a clean source, so for instance, electric vehicles for taxi services,
Right.
aggregated taxi services such as Uber, or food delivery services. Now we have a captive market where the only factor that kind of drives choice is economics. And it's no longer one about whether I have a petrol car or whether I like diesel or whether I like the look of an EV.
Right.
It's just pure economics. And in today's world, there are very few situations where these electric vehicles are not competitive just purely on a basis.
Exactly.
So this one big transformation in how businesses organize assets has now created an opportunity for scaling up the energy shift to zero emission alternatives dramatically.
Right. Kaushik, you pointed out in the beginning that as a country, we've always, looked at any innovation from a point of view where we are not really consuming a lot of energy. But I'm sure the transition has been a little swift. We've also moved, in the wrong direction. And the transition to clean energy often faces resistance. What do you think is the biggest barrier in India, and how can it be addressed?
It's interesting that you asked that question, because this is one area or this is one topic where there is almost uniform consensus across the aisle, across political parties, across social contexts, where everyone does recognize that the energy transition is a developmental imperative for a country like India.
Right.
You see, in a country which is seeking to really jumpstart economic growth, per capita incomes, employment today, wants to be able to do that so that this growth can be sustained for the next 15, 20 years.
That's right.
And that can't happen if you're doing steel, cement, construction. That can only happen if you're doing things which are valued in the future. And in that space, I think the the resistance to all of this change really comes from the ability to scale up. So it's not so much as someone kind of putting roadblocks in this growth trajectory. It's really our own ability to how quickly can we get this up and running. Can we do 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel by 2030? Hard task. Can we electrify our entire 2 and 3 wheeler fleet by 2030? A hard task. Where will we get all of those batteries from and the like?
Yeah.
So it's really that resource constraint that's a challenge.
Right. And I can't resist asking this question that, India has a vast rural population. What opportunities do you see for clean energy solutions to transform lives in these areas? Because I think, the less privileged and that part of India, they are the biggest victims of climate crises. So we need to talk to them. We need to talk about them.
Absolutely. There is no one more who will benefit more from these activities and these kind of strategies. If we can, for instance, solarize pump sets that farmers use for irrigation, that means that they don't have to stay up at night when the electricity board decides to turn on the electricity into the grid so that they can irrigate their farms. They can do it during the day like normal human beings are required to do, right?
Right.
I mean, God kind of designed all of us to work through the day, not in the middle of the night.
Right.
The fact that we can solarize households means that we suddenly have an opportunity where you can watch television, charge your cell phone. If you are not delinquent like I was as a child, perhaps even study in the evening without having to rely on someone sitting in an office somewhere far away in a city to switch on or off the light. If we can kind of find ways that we can use biomass more effectively and make that as a way of increasing soil nutrients, then farmers have to buy much less fertilizer for which they have to pay real cash. So the opportunities for this part of the nation are immense, and I think that's where your earlier signal around barriers kind of is important. That's really where we kind of need to ramp up action.
Right, because it's kind of unfair that, the urban part of India is creating all the more problems for the rural, part of India. So 40 seconds to address the urban India. What would you tell them if you have like those 40 seconds with them? What would you say to them?
Shut down your cars, get out of your cars, use the bus, use the train. There is no reason why you need to go to a mall and buy clothes every week. There is enough of a consumption basket that sits with us that kind of is important and useful for us. If our consumption activities, if our expenditure activities are more productive, those are things that generate income, employment, and activity. And that's really what we need to do. If we can fix transport and construction in urban India, believe you me, the average air quality improvements and the impact on life will be incredible.
Awesome. Absolutely enlightening conversation. Thank you so much, Kaushik, for speaking the way you did. In as many words as anybody can put it, it's clear that the clean energy movement isn't just about technology or policy. It's about people, communities, and the choices we make every day. Kaushik, thank you for sharing your insights and stories that highlight the power of innovation and determination. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sayema, for having me.
All right, before we hear a lot more exciting stuff.
Dear listeners, you have a role to play in cooling it down. Please share your thoughts and suggestions about this podcast with just a mail away. Cool it down at in.bbcmediaaction.org or simply click the link in the descriptor of this episode. After all, we got to hashtag cool it down.
All right, the discussion around sustainability and climate policy is gonna get deeper because joining us is Abinash Mohanty, the sector head for climate change and sustainability at IPE Global. Abinash has been at the forefront of shaping how policies can tackle the challenges of our changing world. We are diving into the recent climate conference, groundbreaking work on India's climate vulnerability index, and how policy can truly change lives. Let's get into it. Welcome to Cool It Down, Abinash.
Good evening, Sayema, and so good to be here.
Let's talk about COP29. These climate conferences can be really intense. Was there a moment at this year's summit that really stood out for you? Maybe something that made you feel hopeful, inspired?
Absolutely. There were many crescent curves as far as COP29 is concerned. But one of the moments which literally gave me good goosebumps, and it is all of those last slog overs, right? Your team is going to win. Sorry, your team is going to lose, but in the last over, you find some a death batsman coming in and hitting sixes. So, and the same moment was created this
And that's quite exciting.
Absolutely. And then you say it, yes, the processes still work. And at COP29, it was almost the lag end. There were extended sessions happening one after the other. There were never consensus. And in the COP processes, it's hard to get consensus. This was primarily a finance COP. And fortunately, there was lesser expectations, at least from the developing countries, because this COP wasn't so sure about putting down money on the table.
Right.
And finally, since it was dubbed as the finance COP, and the new quantified goal or new collective quantified goal is something that had to be agreed, there was a draft text which has been put out, and it was $250 billion. And countries like India, after kind of asking for repetitive platform time to voice what they had, they were not given. And as a result, India and other developing countries like Chile and others, they kind of staged their walkout in the COP, and the whole process was stalled. And that was the time when, again, the European Union, the COP presidency, everybody came together and increased the quantum of money from 250 to $300 billion. I know 250 to $300 billion do not weigh much, but what it weighs is the processes.
Right.
You stage a walkout, and that in a way showed the solidarity between the countries altogether, especially the developing countries, the vulnerable countries whose voice had to be heard most.
Right.
And they kind of shown that solidarity. So that was the goose moment. That was the kind of moment that made us very hopeful, very optimistic that even if you are the most marginalized, even if the whole world, whole globe is trying to corner you, sideline you, you still have got the hope, and the light is at the end of the tunnel.
Oh yes, that's a shot in the arm when your voice is being heard, and your voice changes, makes even a little bit of change. That's definitely extremely encouraging. Abinash, when you were working on India's first climate vulnerability index, I imagine it involved a lot of data and research. But behind those numbers are real people and their stories. Was there a story or moment that made you feel, this is why we are doing this? This is why we need to do this?
Absolutely. I kind of devised the first climate vulnerability index, and now I'm still going forward in terms of establishing climate risk observatories. The numbers are changing, the risks are evolving, but what is constant is how these numbers are kind of impacting lives, livelihood, more importantly, economies and infrastructural development and trajectory pathways of development. When this use data, because climate modeling involves a lot of quantum of big data to be kind of churned, these numbers don't mean anything.
Right.
But what it actually means is when you find 85%, the latest number, in addition to the first climate vulnerability index, now we have revised it, a lot of new numbers are coming in. And the team here in IPE who is working with me through the climate risk observatory process, we have found now that more than 3/4, around 80% of Indian districts are extreme event hotspots. And 80% of Indian districts means 8 out of 10 Indians.
Wow.
Roughly. And out of 8 out of 10 Indians, you find 4 out of 10 women. 8 out of, the numbers are like this. 8 out of 10 Indians are kind of impacted. 4 of them are just in the borderline of becoming, they can resist some sort of climate shock, one after the other, but they'll break down if this becomes a continuous process. And more than 6 women out of 10 women are directly exposed and impacted by climate risk. So these numbers, if you put down,
Right.
then they have a voice. And that voice, that face is a marginalized farmer in some part of India, women carrying water to its home
Right.
where her kids need those water. It's a thriving urban India where they have been paralyzed by urban flooding. Your software hubs like Bangalore are not having water, so you have to shut down. You have to have work from home.
Right.
So these are the stories, right, that connect. And then there are also positive stories to it.
Right.
I'll go back to a very positive story when I was churning the number, and it was all kind of gloomy. In my home state in Odisha,
Yeah.
1999 super cyclone, that's the biggest or the
Yes.
highest intensity cyclone that ravaged around 10,000 people in India. More than 10,000 people lost their lives, actually. Odisha has come a long way in terms of its disaster preparedness. And because of 99 cyclone, a lot of people, we don't have an exact number to it till today, how many people lost their livelihood, so on and so forth. And there's so in the eastern part, there is Puri. And in Puri, you have, it's in the coast of Bay of Bengal.
Right.
Lord Jagannath's temple is there. And just few kilometers away from Puri Jagannath's temple, along the coast of Bay of Bengal, you will find a community. You will find a community of forest dwellers. They are primarily women. When 10 women came together to rejuvenate a forest, which was completely ravaged by 1999 super cyclone, and they have now more than 7,000 trees been planted.
That's
there.
awesome.
And
Interesting.
now, exactly, and that's kind of the story that tells you that, and none of these 7,000 saplings or trees they have kind of put in. These trees are no way or the other kind of supported by government. It is all
Right.
self-funded. In towns, they go to work, and in towns, they will come back. They'll volunteer to manage that, maintain that, and that's the community powerful story. That when climate change is kind of raising lives and livelihood at a faster rate,
Right.
there are so many positive stories where communities are coming together to fight it. They don't need anybody's help. They just need to get started, and they're starting at a bigger way, better way, and paving the way for a lot of people around the globe.
And that's phenomenal. But like you began, the compelling reasons that our underprivileged and less privileged people are the direct victims of climate change, I think those reasons are huge for us to get going and make our strategies even stronger. Abinash, policies can feel disconnected from our everyday lives. You've seen firsthand how policies impact people. Can you share a story of a policy you worked on that changed a community or someone's life?
A lot of policies actually now. One of the policies that kind of where I contributed very, very closely and intrinsically is the setting of the National Action Plan guidelines. The National Action Plan is the broader umbrella climate action plan that Government of India had prepared, and then it has directed many states to prepare their own state action plan on climate change. And earlier, what used to happen is climate adaptation always used to become central government funded climate scientist who is churning numbers. Those are fair, very academic, very thoughtful,
Right.
but there will never ever adaptation spending happening on that. And as a result, what happened is there was a program I was involved in. I was been assigned. It was a regional program, 5 states in India, kind of a part of that program where Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Bihar, Assam, and Maharashtra had to kind of do some sort of climate finance or budgeting so that their climate finance budgeting head could have improved.
Okay.
And I remember going, so I had some of my research assignments outside country, and that was the assignment that made me to come back to India. Other example is from, you mentioned about the climate vulnerability index, and I'll tell you why, how the intersection between science community or scientists like us and the conscience or political will plays out so well if you make them understand in their language of communication.
Right.
So the climate vulnerability index was released, and then in Maharashtra there was a young environment minister. He wanted to understand these numbers, so his team reached out. We had a couple of meetings, and they asked me, "What does this climate vulnerability index at a district level lead to?" I said it can lead you to reprioritize your funds for those districts where real action is much more needed, and the population is getting impacted and are going to be impacted the most across these regions.
Right.
And that's where in Maharashtra the whole reappropriation of budget happened because of some research that we had put out, a hardcore kind of churning of numbers, big data, but that research was what created an impact.
Right.
So what does this
I just want to
reallocation?
come in here and, re-emphasize the importance of how sometimes things have to be studied and understood a little backwards. You come out with a social policy and then you approach the authorities in the government or the parties which are supposed to implement them. And you realize that you need to start with education. You realize that you need to start with awareness. And the entire approach, which you would have thought would be like a couple of steps, they become 5 steps maybe. But that is also important. I mean, how you got the entire department's name changed to what it should be called, I think is a huge beginning to even understanding the scale at which we need to kind of make changes and approach the entire phenomenon. So that's amazing. Imagine a young person, Abinash, wanting to start something in climate action, but doesn't know how to begin. Is there a project or a startup that started small, grew into something impactful, something that could inspire, this young person who wants to do something but has no idea?
A lot of them, actually, Zaima.
Okay.
A lot of them. I have been in the climate space for quite a long time now, and I'm very passionate about the subject. And I travel extensively because I don't want my numbers or my models, which have been kind of churned out using big, large computing or cloud computing, virtual computers, to become a AC room exercise.
Yeah.
You need to capture that story from the ground, and you need to hear out their voices. So I was traveling across Ladakh, and I could find out, and this is almost 7-8 years back. I was traveling across Ladakh, and there was huge Ladakh Ladakh belt, and I could see a lot of people do not had access to energy. The power wasn't there. There was very frequent power cuts, and then there was group of young people. Probably they would have completed their 10+2 standard. They were just coming out of school, and they wanted to do something around this lighting issue. And they started a startup, and the startup was about solar lighting, community lighting. And now they are one of the profitable kind of enterprises who are not only preparing solar kind of lanterns or bulbs, but also are providing technology transfer to the villages and communities.
Right.
There are many stories around the climate tech startups where
So you are saying that there are a lot of opportunities out there which can be turned into business models, and at the individual level maybe we need to really kind of inspire ourselves and encourage ourselves to try and understand what the entire gamut of social policy around climate is all about.
Absolutely. In India, you will find no dearth of issues, and you will also find no dearth of innovations or creativity along them. Right?
Absolutely.
Our tradition and culture and our roots are creative. We have a huge dharohar of traditional knowledge and wisdom. Now, we talk about sophisticated climate services or early warnings. If you go to villages in Sikkim, you will find by the movement of ant, they can predict whether there would be rainfall or not.
Right.
And they are quite precise, I must tell you. Our climate models are not that precise, the amount of precision that these traditional communities have.
Yeah.
So, yes, we do have a lot of these innovations around us. And issues are also there. So you have a live kind of experiment laboratory where you can test these ideas. And as a result, you can actually get them on a social fabric to lead one after the other. Out of the larger, if you have to put down numbers, because that's what I do a lot, almost 35% of the startup ecosystem focuses one or the other in terms of 35% of them are kind of linked directly or kind of indirectly to climate related innovations.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
And those numbers are very good in a way. Somebody is trying to energize a village, somebody is trying to decarbonize a MSME small plant, somebody is
Right.
trying to revolutionize the mobility patterns, how we have been commuting from one point to the other.
Right.
So yes, these innovations are picking up a lot of gear, and
Very optimistic
it's just a
trends.
matter of time.
Yeah, very, very
Absolutely.
optimistic trends. And I think, this is just the perfect time to wrap up today's conversation. I'm left reflecting on the power of policy, not just as words on paper, but as you put it, Abinash, as a living, breathing force for change. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and stories that remind us all of what's possible when we blend ambition with action. Thank you so much, Abinash.
Thank you, Sayema. Looking forward to having a lot more of these conversations with you, and looking forward to making this world more climate proof, because we all need to have this collective action come together. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, it takes everyone to cool it down, be it innovators or policy shapers. If you are thinking what you can do, well, you heard Ashish. Find your voice, advocate for what matters, or you could join a local climate group too. Entrepreneurs, join India's clean energy revolution. There's a huge scope for disruptive innovations in energy that can transform rural lives. Ideas like solarizing irrigation that can empower farmers need to be brought in. The world needs many such ideas to cool it down, and we are determined that we would. This is Sayema signing off from yet another episode, leaving you with loads of ideas and loads of things that we need to start doing. In our next episodes, we will be making many more climate connections, sharing business ideas, and we will think about what each one of us can do to cool it down. For now, bye-bye and take care.
Cool it down. Let's make it our business.